situated.
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
So we're live streaming now. And I want to welcome everyone. This is our apparently election day version of the life purpose course. This is our class number 4. And today we're going to be talking about more of the personality traits that we discuss in this course. And it's really, that might be a misnomer. It's more than personality traits. It's really about soul, kind of soul characteristics that we're going to be discussing. So, are you at all familiar with the Michael Overleaf's Bee?
I am now.
You are now. Well, I have to start somewhere, but that's good.
Yeah.
Good, good. And actually, I was sitting here just getting settled in before V arrived, and I thought I would do something that I do often before class. And what I did is I drew a card from the Gateway Oracle, which we've mentioned before, and I wanted to read it because I thought this one was so appropriate for the class that we have today. And that is the card called Looking Deeper. And it says, deep within me is a majestic radiance. And I think actually, if we're talking about the overleaves and talking about our life purpose and why we're exploring these different characteristics, it is because we're wanting to explore the majesty within ourselves. And I wanted to read a little bit about what it says in the guidebook. It says, the universe wants you to know there is a time to engage and reflect. It might be worth taking a second look at something you previously passed over. Imagine a mystical mountain lake where you can see the reflection of the sky and trees. But when you look beneath the surface, you can see sparkling gems in the crystal clear depths. These treasures are meant for you. By exploring hidden crevices in your soul, you will begin to uncover even more profound levels of the majesty within yourself. I thought that was really beautiful. And I think it describes what we're talking about is we're discovering more of what we sometimes call our uniqueness or our greatness, our magnificence. Really, it is our higher self, the higher dimensional presence of who we are that exists actually with us, that is always with us, but most of the times we don't recognize it. And when we explore these different aspects of the soul in this way, then we're getting to know really more about who we are and learning to value ourselves. So that is the overview of what we're exploring here. And we're focusing on self-awareness, which in itself is such an interesting area. And as a coach and a healer, it's very important. Some estimate, and you have that image of the iceberg where there's just that little piece of the iceberg that's above the surface. Some estimate that for us, the part that's below the surface can be as much as 90% of our awareness, which is a lot. And of course, it varies because as we become more self-aware, the amount that's unconscious goes down. And also then our ability to be present in the fullness of who we are goes up. So that also is what we're aiming for. I have here the quote from Aristotle: knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Mm-hmm. And another part of this, which is interesting, I think, for people who are looking at healing or hypnotherapy or any of these kinds of areas, even coaching, is that a lot of times people are afraid that they're going to find out things about themselves that are, I don't want to, bad is not a good word, but that are, I guess, that are bad. That there's, in other words, that there's something wrong with them. And it's never about that. It's actually all about finding out that there's something, there's that radiance, there are those jewels within us that we're unaware of, that we want to find so that we can embody them and bring more of who we are spiritually into our lives. So that's what we're talking about. Excuse me. It all comes together, of course, in a course like this or a program where we have coaching, which can help immensely with helping clients to strategize and understand themselves better. And then there's the healing part also, for clearing the blocks that are in the way. And when we discuss the kind of thing like we are today, we're going to do both. We're going to bring more awareness to who we are, and also some good things and some things that, because of our lack of awareness, are not really that helpful to us. You could say that are restrictive. I don't want to say good or bad, positive or negative, but there are things that are more life enhancing for us and more true to who we are. And there are things that are less life enhancing and less true to who we are that actually restrict us and prevent us from fully embracing ourselves. So I'll be exploring this today, and Philip will be with you on Thursday to go deeper into it. And also I'm going to discuss the overlays, and I'm also going to discuss a way to balance them. Because one of the things about these kind of characteristics, it's like these large archetypal kind of aspects of the self that don't clear as easily as a lot of things because they're so deep and they're so big. So this is the kind of thing that you can really get into with a client where there are patterns that just don't clear. And it does happen. That I've been working with this for years and it just hasn't gone away. Well, there is a reason for it. And in that case, generally, what it requires is more awareness of yourself, more awareness of that unconscious aspect of what's happening below the surface that you're not aware of. And then by doing that and finding a resourceful place to go to balance it, because you can balance it with other characteristics, that can make a huge difference. And in some cases, it's just, for instance, with me, I had a lot of fear when I was younger. And I reached a point, and I can't remember exactly how I got to it, but it just occurred to me all of a sudden that with all of the fear that I experienced, none of the things that I was afraid of actually happened. The things that happened that could potentially be fearful didn't frighten me because I was addressing them or dealing with them. The things that I spent a lot of time being afraid of were just really in my imagination. And I thought, well, if that's the case, then why am I allowing this? Why am I cultivating these thoughts? It doesn't make any sense. And that's something many of us haven't considered either. It's like if we have a thought, then we have to cultivate it, right? But that's not true. We can be selected. So there's a lot to explore here. And I think one of the main things to realize is that it doesn't happen all at once. This is not something like in 15 minutes you're going to understand it and forever, understand yourself. But if you think about it, if there was something, and there are things like that, there are personality tests, like if you're a red color, blue color, I don't know if you've seen any of those, just very simple things that in the end aren't all that meaningful. This becomes more meaningful the more you explore it. And we've been exploring it for years and still are learning more in depth about it. And we're, I think, able to recognize things that are happening more easily now in terms of the archetypes. So with all of that, V, did you have any questions or anything before we go any further?
No, thank you. What you said has helped me already.
Oh.
Because I was thinking about the how some of the overly like there was like I don't know the crown chakra and my solar plexus and this and that, and I'm thinking, okay, so it's more than one thing, and then I'm thinking about the questions, and I'm like, so what are you going to do with all that? Right? And then you said how to balance the overly. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
fact that we have that that's helpful coming
Yeah.
up. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
Right. And I'll explain it today. It's actually the way that it's done is extremely simple.
Mhm.
But it's that's one of those things that actually is very simple
Mhm.
and profound. So we'll go into that today.
Yeah.
And more, I think, during this
Mhm.
course too. So just taking the broad view to begin as coaches, and we're here studying how to be a spiritual, holistic kind of a life coach. What we're doing with people is helping them to become conscious designers of their lives. And ultimately, the goal is to help people to be more self-actualizing. In other words, when they confront challenges, having tools to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think in so many cases with the people who contact us, they're just confused. They have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things, and it's all just kind of jumbled up in their minds. So it's very hard for them to be clear about anything. I know we've all experienced that feeling of having lost ourselves kind of somehow in all of the commotion that's going on within us and outside of us too. And actually, I think today's a good example of that with the election. There's a lot going on. Apparently, because there aren't many people here too, probably there's a lot that has a lot to do with it. So it's an exciting opportunity. And as I suggested in the beginning, we are looking for the jewels. We're not looking to tell people, well, you're this really horrible person, because we're not. Where we feel limited, that's the way I describe it, is it's a misunderstanding. So if we feel, for instance, that we're unworthy or not good enough or not bright enough or not this or that enough, or maybe we're too old or too young or too short or the wrong color or whatever it is, that's all the illusion. None of it really has anything to do with anything. And we need to be able to set those things aside, the things that society might try to heap onto us, and open to what's really true. And we also know that. We know that in our hearts. We can sense when there's truth. So that's where we're going. I think another thing that's exciting doing coaching with people is that you can help them to discover things that they never would on their own. And I think that's true for people who are coaches too. We need each other. I think if we think that there's that idea, no man is an island or woman, I think it's true that when we have others to support us, and with healing, it's been proven that when you put a group of people together for healing or for changing the world into a better place, if you have a group of people together rather than just one, it's exponentially more powerful. So we all are here for each other and want to take advantage of the benefits that we have because of that. And I think that's one of the things I really like about teaching too, when there are, of course, they're very small class today, which is fine. But it is, if you have a group of people with a common purpose, it is exciting. So again, coming back to the part about always looking at what's true from a higher perspective and seeing the things that are below that as a misunderstanding. If you can help people to find those jewels within themselves, you're doing a great gift. And as a coach and a healer, people really, they want to be around people who build them up. And many people don't have anyone playing that role, which is also interesting. So we have that gift, and we have that opportunity to help people understand that they are uniquely special, regardless of what anyone around them is saying. I've talked to so many people who have been beaten down for their entire lives. And then all of a sudden, in a program like this, they realize, well, this isn't true. None of these things that have been heaped on me are true. And it's like the a funny term, but the being reborn, it is reborn in a real way. So that's what we're offering. Going into a little bit more into typing, that idea of typing people, and how there are a lot of different personality tests and things like that. There are systems that coaches do commonly use typing systems, and one of the really common ones is the Enneagram. I don't know. Are you familiar with that? The Enneagram?
I read it and forgot it.
Yeah. It actually, it's one that a lot of people use, and certainly everyone has their choice, but what we're talking about here is much deeper. And having been exposed to that, both of those and other systems, this one I think is really the most comprehensive one that I've seen. And it isn't just a system. It's a truth about who we are, about the choices we make. We do make choices of what kind of gifts we want to embrace in a lifetime. Like, I'm going to be focusing on this and maybe not so much on that. And they are choices. And we embody them or embrace them for a reason. So that's another part of it. Philip and I have explored this for many, many years. And at first we had access to parts of it. And I remember at a certain point thinking, well, gee, this just isn't complete. They're missing pieces. But with all of the pieces that we present here, I haven't felt that anything really was missing in terms of being able to understand one's own nature. So that's a great gift. From there, talking just a little bit about vibrations. We talk in the manual about developing psychological strength. And I think that's one of the things that we get when we know ourselves, because we feel we're not always questioning ourselves. We know who we are. We know why we're here. There's much more of a sense of certainty. And it's not a self-absorbed place to be. It's not an arrogant place to be. It's just more of, I understand who I am and why I'm here. And of course, those are some of the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? So we can get answers to those too by exploring these Michael teachings. The Michael teachings, I think one of the things I really loved about the system as a whole, when I first read about it, and this was many years ago, not something that was commonly said at the time, is that the journey is from fear to love. Actually, it's from love. We start out with love. I have it actually right behind me, my hands on. We start with love. Love is energetically, to me, love is connectedness. Divine love or unconditional love is a state where there is no separation. So if we really truly love someone or something, we don't have a sense of there being any barrier between us. Not that, and that isn't to say that we aren't complete within ourselves. It's just that there is not that kind of something that is false that is between us. So we start in that place of love, a place of connectedness, and then we come down into the third dimension, which is characterized by fear. It's kind of like the opposite end. And you could, if you explore all of the different emotions, anger, fear, whatever it is, frustration, they all come back to fear, essentially. So we have fear, we go from love to fear. Now we're going back from fear to love. And of course, love is the ability to love is built right into us in our heart, which is also where the creator connects, that where our souls connect with the body. So it all fits. It all fits into a very cohesive picture. And when I read that the first time, Philip and I were in an organization, a spiritual organization where, and we've talked about this a lot, where the leader was the source of truth and everybody was supposed to follow the leader and realize that we were nothing, basically. Just having that kind of an understanding that we are here to return to love is a very different picture than we are here to obey someone else's idea of what is right for us, because we also are looking to find it within. So these tools, these overleaves that we're going to be talking about today, they're not intended in any way to distract us from the truth that we feel in our hearts. It's another way of understanding things that might be enhancing, life enhancing for us. It's never about categorizing, like, oh, look, he's this and that person's like that's not what it's about. It's about opportunities. And you'll see that as we go through it. Any other thoughts, B, on anything yet? Okay.
Listening
Okay.
and learning.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
I think maybe at this point it would be a good time to go to the overleaf chart. And it is, I just have mine. I've made a lot of notes on mine. So this is in your Awaken to Your
Yeah,
True
let me get
Purpose
mine.
book.
I have to get my Kindle. I forgot to bring it over.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay. Anyhow, that one, it's on 2 pages, starting on page 26 of Awaken to Your True Purpose. It's nice and big so you can see everything easily. We also, on your in your resource section under today's class, we have a smaller version, but it's not as easy to read. So the one in the book is the better of the two. And what I'm going to do is just go through the basics of it to understand how it works. And I'm going to start on the left, going down the left side. With overleaves, they are aspects, so you could say archetypes, aspects of the self. And there are different.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Jane. Which page are you on?
26.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
There are different categories of these archetypes. So going down the left column, the first one is your role. And in the Michael teachings, they teach that as being one of the most noticeable and important ones that actually is, in their view, a characteristic that you carry through a series of lives, if you believe in that, which is optional. So the role is your way of being. It's just like just like the way you approach things.
Mhm.
Some of us are more extroverted. We talk about inward and outward. Some are more extroverted. Some are more introverted. Some are more oriented towards inspiration. And now I'm kind of going across the columns. There are
Mhm.
two roles that are inspiration oriented. There are two that are about expression, self-expression. There are two that are action oriented. And then there's one that is neutral, assimilation, which is in the roles, it is described as a scholar. That's a neutral role. And I think we all know people like that who are scholarly, and they tend to approach things in a very neutral way, which I've appreciated quite a bit myself. Evaluating, you could say, evaluating different trends or different ways of learning, different spiritual uh, practices. A scholar would approach it neutrally. Like, well, an example actually spiritually is, I think, in my mind, Deepak Chopra. And just mentioning celebrities or or people who are famous, it's not to make it light, but it actually is a way of kind of understanding what they feel like energetically. And he feels to me very neutral compared with someone who feels uh, very polarized. In other words, neutral would be not polarized. I'm sure we can identify quite a few people who are very polarized. One example that comes to mind today with the election and everything is Donald Trump. He's very, very polarized. He's not a scholar, obviously. So the roles, I'll go into those more. I want to just go complete going down the left column here. So the second one is called your goal. So it is your primary motivator. And one of the most common ones, which makes it kind of easy to understand, I think, is growth. There are a lot of people who their main goal is to grow. And you find people, it's according to the chart, 40% of the population approximately has a goal of growth. And there are other ones, and I'll go through those a little more too. The next one is your mode. And your mode is your approach or the way you accomplish your goal. So there are, again, going across a lot of different ones: passion, caution, power, perseverance, observation. Observation is the neutral one. And if you think about those things, you can start to identify people who have those different characteristics. So your mode, your approach, your way of reaching your goal. It's kind of like you could say it's an action. Your mode, it's the action, the way you actually move through the world. The next one is your attitude. So that is your mental perspective. And attitudes include Stoics, spiritualists, skeptics, idealists, cynics, realists, pragmatists. It's not, none of them are unusual words. And I think we can all identify easily people who are who fit into these different categories of attitudes. The bottom one is, we call it chief defense. It in the system, some of the words that we use, we actually coined those phrases. The chief defense is in the Michael teachings called chief weakness. We call it chief defense because it actually is the way that we defend ourselves. And I'm not going to actually talk about this. We talk about it separately because it's kind of in a different category. And it is a very important one too, the way that, like, when we're cornered, what do we do? if we feel like we're being attacked or we don't know how to move through something, these are different ways that we approach that. And well, as an example, impatience, like a person might become impatient and kind of become kind of attack it, or maybe become a martyr and just feel sorry for oneself. They can actually seem kind of funny, although they don't feel funny. And this is one of the reasons, the main reason I think why we approach it separately, because it is, when you come to that chief defense, it is a very vulnerable part of the person. And it's something that needs to be addressed because of that. In that way, you have to be very aware, I think, of the way that you approach it with a person, because you don't want to activate it, right? Because that doesn't help. But it's really, really helpful to understand it as a coach and a healer and as a communicator. I'll just say one example because it is so funny to me. And you'll run into clients with some of the other overleaves too that have a pretty strong characteristic, but stubbornness is one. And I can remember working with a client one time, and a lot of times I'll work with people, and first we begin with a conversation to understand what they want or what the problem is. And so this woman was telling me she was telling me what the problem was. And I said, oh, so it's this and this and this, just I would be mirroring back exactly what she said. Oh, no, it's not that. And then, okay, well, tell me what it really was. And she'll talk a little more, and then I'll mirror that back and I'll say, oh, then you mean it was blah, 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 blah. And so, oh, no, it wasn't that. And I think we must have gone on for 10 minutes that way before I realized that I was going to have to stop her, because I wasn't going to ever get anywhere because she was defending herself by going against whatever I would say. And I was actually just saying what she said. So we were going in circles. Anyhow, that's just one example. And we can look at them. We all have aspects of all these things too. So it's not like we don't know them. But we can also be compassionate to people, because when they're happening, people are not aware that they're happening. Generally, they have no idea. And if we just going back, leaving chief defenses there for a while, going back to roles are a good place to start, because they are pretty much really out there to be seen and understood. And I don't know if they actually are, if there's anything about a role that a person would particularly resist. They're all just characteristics and really strengths, you could say. So going with the axes, so we have the inspiration axis. We have the 4 axes: inspiration, expression, action, and assimilation. There's an inward and outward one here. The inward role is server, a person who serves others. And a lot of the kinds of people who become healers and coaches of different kinds, but I think more particularly healers, are servers and nurses, people who serve other people and who receive the most, you could say, most of us, and the greatest sense of fulfillment when they're serving others. So that's the server. And they're not people who stand out a lot, because that's not what they want. They're more introverted. They don't want to stand out. But I mentioned a few potential people here. The Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa. She's probably like, you could say, a classic server, or was. And as a president, Jimmy Carter was or is, I guess he's still alive. He is a server. And as a president, in a way, he stood out for that because he just wanted to help other people. In fact, I think Joe Biden also is a server. So server, then on the other side is priest. So that is the extroverted position of the inspiration axis. And there are fewer, you'll notice on the chart, there are fewer of the outward focused ones, the extroverts, for a reason, because they're the people who are more natural leaders. And we need more followers than leaders. So you'll find like priests, it says 7%. Servers could be as much as 30% worldwide. And these are figures. They're not mine. They come from, it says at the bottom, from a book called the Michael Handbook by Jose Stevens. So the priest, and this is not saying a person is a priest is not to suggest that they are priests. It's not a role, meaning like a server doesn't mean that they're a server in a restaurant. It just it's just a description. And they could be, a priest could be a priest, but they could also be a leader of another kind. The ones I mentioned here, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, I think might be a priest. What was I? No, I can't remember her name. Anyhow, priests can be in all kinds of different professions. Another role of people who can commonly be priests are reporters. A reporter who wants to go out and tell the truth. He wants to get the truth out to people. So again, the inspiration axis is wanting to communicate, what's right in the world. So those are the inspiration. Expression, we have on the introverted side, artisan on the outward side. It's called sage, which to me is not a very good description of what it really is, because I think of a sage as a wise person, kind of a sage. But this here, it's more, the sage is more like an entertainer. I think you could think, well, politically, since we're talking about politics today a little bit, it's just kind of up there. Bill Clinton, I believe, is a sage. They like to tell jokes. He'd play his whatever saxophone or whatever. They just and they're very fun loving. A lot of entertainers, comedians, etc. They also are very interestingly. I think one of the things that interests me about them is they're very oriented towards words, like using words, and they're just very aware of the words they use. It mentions that there are positives, pluses, and negatives, so it could be what's considered the positive pole and the negative pole for each one, which is just a very, just like a very surface way of seeing them, but it is a kind of an overview. Verbosity is the negative pole for the sage. They just like to talk. They like to hear themselves talk. They like to have crowds of people around them listening to them. That's just who they are. Artisans, they're more like poets and people who are more in the background, who aren't looking to be like movie stars or something. But the expression is a very important part or aspect of their lives. In fact, that's the way they are. I am an artisan. So it can be artistic in many different ways. I think Albert Einstein actually was an artisan. And it's just if you look at it, like he was a very intellectual person. So what would be artistic from that intellectual point of view is really about scientific discovery, just so again, if you look at the roles, you have to be very broad in the way that you understand them. Like, what is it they each of these are really wanting? An artisan just wants to express themselves, and you can see some of my art projects in the background there. I just love, and everything for me, if I think about it, and this is a way to understand your role, is everything for me is like an art project. I remember when I was in school and we would do graphs and stuff, I would have all different color pens, and I'd be, my main interest would be, oh, that's so pretty. Just looking at it from that perspective. So artisan. Then moving over to action. And it's interesting when you start to look at how different all of these are. The action roles are warrior and king. So the warrior is the more inwardly focused one. The warrior is the loyal warrior who is following a cause. So actually, interestingly, a lot of people in politics are warriors too. Hillary Clinton, I believe, is a warrior. Other ones I have here, Jane Fonda. So you'd think, well, she's an art, or she's supposed to be a sage because she's an actress, but you have to not be formatory about it. And I think that another way to look at these is that I think every person tends to have a primary one and a secondary one. So you might say, well, I think it's this, but then there's that too. So if you feel there are two, there probably are. Clint Eastwood, just very action-oriented people. Martha Stewart, business, Actually, I'm wrong there. She's a king. She has her domain, she has her empire.
And she's an artisan. She's an artisan too.
She probably is artisan, a king combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. JFK is another person, maybe not so well known with younger people. The former president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, a wonderful example of a king. Oh, and I think I would say Barack Obama, he has priest and king, I think. He has king too. It's king types, they just dominate by being in a room. They just are. They don't have to, unlike a sage, they don't have to say anything.
Charismatic.
Right. They just are. Well, and they just energetically have a presence, a certain kind of a presence about them. Anyhow, so these are three that are polarized, more inward or outward, extrovert or introverted. And then the neutral one is scholar, which I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And again, for each of them, there's a positive pole and a negative pole. So the positive pole for the scholar is knowledge. Mm-hmm. They seek knowledge. And the negative pole is theory. So it can get, like, you could say, bogged down. The negative pole might be what bogs a person down, being theoretical about things. Mm-hmm. And again, the positive and negative, they are just overviews, but they really make a lot of sense. The server, the positive pole is service. The negative pole is bondage. Because they want so badly to serve, they'll just do what people ask them to do. And then they have no energy or time for themselves. And this is where you get to the practical part of it too. Like, if a person's a server and they're in bondage, they need help. How do I get out of being in bondage? And I'll talk about that too. So, any thoughts about the roles, B?
No, I think you're right in that they're pretty powerful and very deep. Mm-hmm. So they go a little deeper than, and then also the how things can cross over. You mentioned Albert Einstein, and I was reading something where he was talking with Marilyn Monroe, and she was like, "Well, if we had kids together with your brain, we'd have kids and me with beautiful kids, intelligent kids." And he says, well, "Maybe with your brain, she had a very high IQ."
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
says maybe with your brain, we'll have
Mhm.
smart kids. So that's like the different poles, right? It
Right.
can be more than one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also what he's talking about with brain is creativity,
Yeah. And
the
she's
creative part of the
mhm,
brain.
mhm.
And that is the positive pole of the artist, and the negative pole is self-deception. Um, I was trying to think, there's another word for it, is just trying to make something seem important that's not.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
can't think of there is a word for it, but that's what self-deception
Oh,
is
so
like.
it's like sort of like self-importance. I mean, I've had a lot of artist friends in my life, and I've had some struggle artist friends.
Well, artisans are very temperamental, and I'll explain why that is at another time.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, they also, it's interesting because there's so many things to explore with all of this. Um, One of them is some of the roles, people in those roles tend to be more conventional, and some are
Yeah.
less conventional. The ones I think that are the least conventional are the artisans and the sages. They're the ones that can be just like way out there.
But
Artisans and sages.
I felt like you. I have such a sensitivity for the idea of what a sage is, because for me it meant someone who was older and wiser.
Right. And
And
it's not. And I don't
yeah,
like that word for it.
yeah, this is something else kind of thing. I mean, I get it, the verbosity part, but also I thought it was sharing information. So
Right. It is.
I get it
But it
though.
is more, I think, more like and this is also, I think, part of Donald Trump. He's probably a king sage.
Mhm.
He
Hmm.
wants to
Mhm.
entertain and
Mhm.
in his
Except
own
he,
way.
except he's not funny.
Right. But he thinks he is. I mean,
Oh my,
anyhow. I mean,
yes,
verbosity is a problem.
yes, 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 yep.
Yeah. Anyhow, so
Self-deception.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so going on from the roles, next the goals. Uh, the first one under the inward part of the inspiration axis is reevaluation. And that one it's a very small percentage of the population, and it is generally people who have restrictions, uh, like maybe mentally handicapped. I don't want to say any words that are offensive. I might not know the right words. Um, but people who they choose a simple life uh, for whatever reason. It might be reevaluation is just to, they might have had a very complicated life and need just to calm down, have something where they can just more be. Some kind of, often there's some kind of a handicap involved.
Yep.
And the negative pole is withdrawal, the positive pole is simplicity. So people sometimes think they have that, but probably not unless they have some kind of something that would uh, cause them to have a very simple life. On the other side, the inspiration axis is growth. It's like, and the problem with growth often is that a person gets confused because there are so many things to learn. So that's the negative pole. The positive pole is evolution. So interesting. I put down here, and of course, some of my references are people who are older from just from my past. I put Shirley MacLaine as a person with growth. And of course, there are a lot of people. Oprah Winfrey, the queen of growth, really wonderful. So And she's on the positive pole too. Interesting, very interesting. Yeah. Maybe Deepak Chopra there to focus on growth. Then, so in the expression axis, we have discernment on the inward side and acceptance on the outward side. Sometimes I feel if you follow a column straight down, like if a person was an artisan and their overleaves were in the same column, that would probably be like the classic artisan. But it doesn't work that way. It's not. And people, I think, especially who use the Enneagram, think of like you're just following one column. They can be all over the place. So I'm an artisan. I am in the caution mode, but I'm a pragmatist. So a pragmatist is way over at the other end. So you're not necessarily following one column, but when you look at artisans and discernment, like artisans, it is about discerning beauty a lot of times. Discernment is largely involved, although only 2% of the population has discernment. I think of people like food critics, as discerning, like that's their job. They're discerning the taste of food, or people who own art galleries, or a lot of times fashion designers or jewelry designers. Going into a jewelry store where the owner is the designer of the jewelry in the store, and there's just, you can just feel it. It's beautiful, but it often is also associated with a lot of arrogance.
Yeah, it could be alienating.
Yeah, and that can be alienating for sure. And that's where the rejection comes in. I think that they think they know what's best in every way, and they're not, a lot of times, not very open to listening to other people. So rejection is the negative pole. On the other side, actually, acceptance and sages really go together, because sages, they want people to like them. Sally Fields, oh, now I know they like me. It's like, oh, finally. The negative pole is ingratiation, which makes sense. Like a person who's wanting so badly to be accepted that they'll just do whatever they have to do to have that happen, to be accepted. The positive pole is agape. Then moving on to the action axis. It is, so for the warrior, it is loyalty, which makes sense. The negative pole is exploitation, it's easy to exploit a person who's loyal. And loyalty, the positive side is devotion. But people who are loyal, actually, I can't help but think politically today. Just think of all the people who have been loyal to Donald Trump. Exploitation, they allow themselves to be exploited.
He's loyal to no one.
Right. So that can very easily happen. And when you think of a lot of people who are loyal to a religious cause, also they can easily be exploited. But the positive side is devotion, which is a positive thing. So it's interesting how any of these can be positive or detrimental, can be supportive or detrimental to our beingness and our growth. The king, as suggested before, is dominion. They just are. They just are, they're just leaders, natural leaders. So the positive side is leadership. The negative side is dictatorship. Interesting. Donald Trump. You could say Donald Trump, and you could compare him to Barack Obama. One is leadership, one is dictatorship. Then going to assimilation, the goal is relaxation. the positive part is free flowing. And I think we all know people like they're just kind of, they're just free flowing and somehow everything works out,
I
which
wish.
just amazes me. And I think, I often think of all those people who sit around in coffee shops all day. It's like, where do they find the time to do that? And a lot of times it's people who are in relaxation. The negative pole is inertia. Interesting. So are these making sense to you, V?
Finally, I'm getting why it's called overleaves.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking,
Yeah,
what does
it
that
is
mean?
like, yeah, it is like the clothing kind of characteristics we put on
I'm looking at the
to
way,
explore ourselves and, have different ways, have different perspectives
yeah,
from
like,
which to explore
and the
life.
way the chart is made.
Mhm.
So across from role is server, coming down under inspiration, and then so on and so forth, right? It's like layers
Mhm.
with the role goal mode. So
Mhm.
so this kind of shows to me how they say there's many facets to a person.
Right. And that's what I
Yeah.
was saying about how there's so many different systems. Well, and like the Enneagram, it's like it's all you're one column and you're everything in that column.
Yeah.
But there's so much more. We are very complex. And
Yeah.
it just becomes really fascinating to me. And it's not this is not something like the purpose is to categorize yourself. It's really to explore. And you might think for years that you're one thing and then decide, well, gee, I'm actually something else, or you might shift
Well, I think you
as
said
you.
something. You said something about depending what's going on or what you're going through.
Mhm.
So going in the groove, maybe the positive aspects of your overlease can show. And then if you're under stress or under pressure or something happens, the other side can come out.
Mhm. Right, and then you go to your chief defense. Maybe getting warm here. So the mode again, this is how you act. And I mentioned I'm in the caution mode, so I'm very cautious. I stand back and think about things a lot. The negative pole is phobia. You can become phobic. So people who are highly phobic are likely in the caution mode. The positive pole is deliberation, being deliberate. Um, and I took that out of order, but I mentioned it just because I'm familiar with it because that's where I come from. If you start in the inspiration area, the inward one is reservation. People who are just reserved by nature. The negative pole is inhibition. So it's like being inhibited. The positive pole is being restrained, which can be a positive thing. And some of these are, you could actually, as in addition to individuals, you can associate different overleaves with countries, for instance, or with cultural groups. So reservation is often associated with the British. They're very reserved in the way that they approach things. And it's not good or bad. I mean, actually, it can be. Restraint is a beautiful thing. And it is you could also say that someone like a figure skater, they would have to be very deliberate in the way that they move, right? They couldn't just be kind of flowing, like free flowing all over the place. They have to everything, or a ballet dancer. So reservation mode, you can see it in a lot of different ways. On the other side, outward, inspiration, passion. And the positive pole, self-actualization, the negative pole, identification. So and ministers can be like, you could say, you could put the negative pole as zealousness. Like they can become zealous. identified with a certain position and just like really going with it. So passion, caution we talked about. Then on the positive pole of the expression is power. The negative aspect of that is oppression. The positive one is authority. Then moving on to the action. And it's interesting. I think action people, to me, really stand out. I guess they stand out because they're out, they are doing things. You know, they're out busy doing things and they're not very self-reflective. So they become more self-reflective as they mature spiritually or as they evolve. So a warrior, for instance, who is very evolved could be more restrained. they might be in reservation. And that's an example, like a warrior in the reservation mode would be a very different one from a warrior in the power mode. So the associated here, the inward one, perseverance. So just, they'll just continue to battle the fight the fight. So the positive side is persistence. The negative pole is unchanging. They can become too rigid. For the outward one in the action axis is assertion. The positive pole is dynamism. The negative pole is belligerence. I think of assertion a lot of times with lawyers and politicians. They're just our natural, they naturally assert themselves in their positions, but they can be belligerent. Then for the neutral one, which makes sense, observation. And if you look, that is said to be 50% of the population. Their way of moving through the world is through observation, which also shows why, there's so many people who follow crowds, like, sporting events, like thousands and thousands of people, observation. And they can be in coffee shops too. Of course, it's in the same line as relaxation. So observation, the positive pole is clarity. The negative pole is surveillance. And it is, you could say, if these are ways we learn also, because it's the way we approach things, a lot of people do learn by observing, right? They observe life. So sitting in a coffee shop might be a good thing for them. And again, none of this is good or bad. It just, I think it's just interesting when you think about all of these characteristics and you can identify them in people. Going on to attitudes, and I just want to get through these, then we can move on to how we can shift if you find yourself in a negative pole, which is fascinating. So the inspiration axis, the attitude is stoic. The negative pole is resignation. The positive pole is tranquility. And that's an interesting one too. I think if you're a coach or a healer, some people, I've had people even tell me, well, I just can't get excited about anything. They're just stoic. They're just kind of kind of there. Philip, actually, one of his sisters is a stoic, and she actually, I think she has a lot of resignation too. We don't talk to her actually very much, but when we used to talk to her, we talked about something. What do you think about this? Or wouldn't this be exciting? Or are you concerned? And she would often say, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like to everything. Oh, it doesn't really matter. Nothing matters. Isn't there a song like Queen or something? Nothing matters. Another thing that people might say that's kind of stoical is whatever. isn't this exciting? Oh, whatever, just kind of, it's kind of listless a lot of times. But a person, and it's interesting, it's in the same line with the server and reevaluation. I can see just being a stoic, being just very level. With the positive or the outward, it's not positive, negative. The outward aspect of the inspiration axis is spiritualist. The negative pole is being gullible. Spiritual people who are gullible, just very gullible, they'll believe anything. The positive pole is verification, which makes sense. Moving to the expression axis, the inward one is skeptic. The negative pole is suspicion. The positive pole is investigation. And some of these you can see also in the choice of overleaves. Some of them are more challenging. And I think like being a skeptic is probably a challenging overleaf to have. Because you're questioning things all the time. I would think being a stoic is probably not that easy either. Because I think that's where, like I've said, I have had clients before and they say, well, you talk about getting excited about things and I can't. They don't have it in them somehow. But I will go into, again, solutions for these things. For the sage or the outward expression is idealist. The idealist wants everything to be ideal. Philip has a strong idealist tendency, like looking for the perfect everything. The negative pole is naivete. The positive pole is unification. Then going on to the action axis, we have cynic. We're in the inward side, it's cynical. The negative pole is defamation. The positive pole is insight, being insightful. And I think that to me also would be a very challenging one, being a cynic. On the outward side, realist. The positive pole is objectivity. The negative pole is subjectivity. And it's hard for me to exactly explain. Realists, I think they are objective. A lot of times you can find reporters who are realists, and they're believable because you can feel that there's something objective in them. And the one I have here, actually cynic, I have Woody Allen, very classic cynic. For realist, Michael Moore, and probably a lot of people are not familiar with Michael Moore. But I'm trying to think.
That's a good example.
Michael Moore? Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of younger people probably don't know Michael Moore. But
he's getting pretty popular now with his movies.
Oh, is he?
With all Bowling for Columbine, a couple of other movies he made. Like you said, really a realist.
People still watch those.
And pretty he's, I don't know, I forget skip him. Yeah, they watch them. I think the whole conscious community,
Yeah.
Younger conscious.
Anyhow, I'm trying to think. I can't think of the names.
I'm sorry,
I can think of a couple of people. I can't think of their names.
Well, can I ask you about the subjectivity part of it? The realist? How do you see the subjectivity part?
Well, it's the opposite of objective. Like they can get hung up in areas and become subjective in their evaluations of things.
Okay.
And then assimilation is pragmatist. The negative pole is dogmatic. the positive pole is practical. You know, the how-to type. So I'm a pragmatist, a how-to person. Yeah. Yeah, I do think a lot of reporters are realists. That makes them believable. And of course, I guess there are a lot of them that aren't too, but I think I tend to listen more to the ones who are. Okay, any questions on any of that, Bea?
No, that, I mean, in some ways, like you said, it's kind of simple and then it's complex.
Right,
The layers are complex, but what it does show is that in one, let me see what term you might use. In one role, in a certain mode, you might be a certain way. And then like you said, what do you have, inward, outward? You
right.
might be the opposite way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it's still that same perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting when you mentioned that before, it made me think also in different situations that it brings out something different. And it's interesting. Probably we've all had the experiences like you have maybe uh people you work with or something, and then there are people you socialize with, and then if you're in one situation you run into one of the other people, there's a discomfort
Yes, yes.
because it's a different part of you. You know, it's almost like those having split personalities. Like different situations do bring out different parts of us. I remember one time running into someone from work, and I was doing something with Philip, and we're just playing around. You know, just very different. And I ran into someone from work, and I just became really confused. It was like that wasn't me at all. But
Because
it does.
you might be in a relaxed mode and then you have to
Right.
fluctuate because that's not a safe space. Maybe you have to be the work person, the
Right.
colleague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I was an architect. You have to. And then Philip and I, you know, out playing or whatever.
Right.
So, it's a whole different thing. So we do all do things that put us in different places. So I wanted to show the process that we recommend for shifting if you find yourself in the negative pole of an overleaf. And I wondered, if you noticed any that might where you might want to shift it.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah, I'd like to understand. So it's funny, they call it an axis or focus. And there's 4 different axes, as you said?
Yeah, the axes are inspiration and the
And
focuses are inward and outward or neutral.
or expression. That's the same thing? No.
Well, the axis, like inspiration, expression, action, and assimilation are 4 axes. And
Okay.
within each one there are focuses. So inward,
Okay.
outward, and neutral.
Okay. So
That could be
honestly,
the focus.
I would say if we can look at that sage thing as the way that you and I see it, I see part of myself being a sage, and then the other part of myself as scholar. I think I really get bogged down in theory because I'm trying to understand. And when I think, but I'm older now, so everything's different. When I was younger, I wanted to talk about everything I knew. And now I don't need to talk about it so much unless there's real focus and clarity, you know, to where I'm talking. And or really need to share information. But I get my way of learning, my fear of retaining what I'm learning and theory, I overwhelm myself.
So in growth.
So I'm trying to look down here. I need more relaxation. I need to,
I'm trying to just identify, like you were, go back to when you're learning,
okay.
you overwhelm yourself.
With theory, yeah, because I'm trying to really understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm like relaxation is a mode in my life that keeps recurring because I'm overwhelming myself with trying to understand, trying to
Mm-hmm.
grasp the theory, thinking that's going to make it stick in my mind. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
something like
Well,
that.
let's say you find yourself, just as an example, to
Hmm.
identify one, you find yourself in the negative pole of growth, confusion, because of all the theories
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
trying to understand all the theories.
Yes. Yep.
The idea with this is to balance it. You go to the positive pole of the overleaf that is opposite of it, which in this case would be reevaluation.
To balance.
And so you would balance confusion with simplicity.
Okay, so I went from confusion to how did I get to simplicity?
To balance the negative pole of one overleaf, you go to the opposite overleaf next, in other words, the one right next to it. And
Okay.
you look at the positive pole and say, well, say, think about when you're confused with all these theories, and
Mhm.
you instead decide, I'm going to focus on simplifying this for myself.
Okay. Okay.
How does that feel?
That feels good if I can relax enough that step back and relax enough. That
Mm-hmm.
feels that
Well, I
that's
think the thing with this, with the overleaves, and you can obviously do processes with it, but what, as I mentioned, a lot of times what happens is it doesn't work because these are so deep. There's, and so kind of they're big. They involve a lot of things.
yeah.
Um, it needs to be a conscious effort. So if you're looking at confusion and you say, well, when you're in that place, what if you simplify and you think, well, I'm just going to explore maybe one theory, or how might you simplify it when you get confused by so many theories? How might you do that?
I just try to absorb too much. That's so how do I simplify would be like you said to well I keep thinking about relaxation.
Mm-hmm. Well, um, another thing, just and
I'm
from
trying to
the
find,
other side, actually, and this might actually work, because if you so say you're in relaxation, you find yourself in the negative pole of inertia. Where do you go? There isn't an opposite side.
well, there isn't.
Well, no, because there's only one. The assimilation is neutral, so there isn't a second one there,
Oh, okay.
you see. So
Yeah.
the idea, if for any of those overleaves, is that you can choose the positive pole of any of the overleaves, the other ones. So if you
Oh,
find
okay.
yourself in inertia, you could ask yourself, well, what could I actually do instead? But I mentioned that because from the other side, you could say, maybe if you're in the negative pole of one of the overleaves that have positives and negatives, if you go to free flowing, that might be it, because that's what you're talking about, is going to relaxation, going to
Yes.
a free
Okay.
flowing place. I mean, that makes sense too.
Well, it
So
makes sense. It makes sense because if I'm overwhelmed with theory, that is no movement. That's inertia.
right, yeah, and just do something that would go make you free flowing. I had
Mhm.
never thought of this before, but if you think, I'm trying to think, so say I was in discernment, I'm in rejection, so I'm thinking, well, I know what's most sophisticated, I know what's best.
Mhm.
This person can't tell me, I I have it all. I know everything. So, and I'm thinking, well, gee, I know that's not true. what if I go into free flowing? Like, oh, well, there might be nuances that I haven't considered, or I could just be more tolerant. I mean, I'm
So
just
you,
saying, I like what you're saying because I think it might work for a lot of the negative poles to go to the neutral one, to the
oh,
positive pole.
to balance, go to the positive pole or the neutral one? Positive or neutral?
The positive pole of the neutral one. Well, say
Oh, the
you're
positive
in
pole.
verbosity,
Okay.
the sage, you were mentioning that too. Maybe,
Mhm.
just get,
Mhm.
and maybe that isn't happening anymore, but just as an example, and you say, well, gee, um, what could I do instead? What if I went to a more scholarly approach and just looked at knowledge? And I think actually you were saying that was what, as I understood, that was what kind of solved the verbosity problem, is knowing more
Mhm. Or the
or just
verbosity could be
speaking.
in your head. It could be chatter in your head.
Yeah, yeah. And just
Mhm.
instead, just seek what do you really know, rather than,
Right, right.
or
Mhm.
just seek more knowledge that will help you. If you're being verbose because you're just trying to fool people, which actually does happen with sages, trying to, a lot of times, like sometimes, and there are obviously not all sages, but like the idea of a salesman, who's trying to talk people into things with their verbosity.
Yeah,
If you want to be more
trying to
honest,
convince
right,
somebody of your ideas
right,
or
right,
opinions.
yeah. Anyhow, so say if we were talking about that, so you have a little confusion, you're thinking of going into relaxation and being more free flowing.
Mhm.
So how would that look? Like, what would happen if you did that? When
Slow
you're
down.
so concerned about all the theories and just going through
Well,
your head.
I would slow down, and then really, how important is it? I mean, if I'm needing to share some information because it's helpful, it's needed, that's one thing.
Right.
If we're just working in a land of ideas, how important is it? And things change all the time. So,
Right. So it can,
okay.
and that's kind of your simplicity also fits in too. Just
Mm-hmm.
simplify it. Relax, go with the flow. Just
Mm-hmm.
let the things go that you don't remember. Can't remember everything, like you said.
And if you're really under pressure, sometimes things pop up when you need them.
Mm-hmm. Or you can make it into a list.
That's what
Write it
I do.
down and then
Oh God, notebooks and notebooks I'll probably never look at.
so you probably have growth, huh?
I
Physical.
do in a circular way. Some word I'm trying to think of. Mhm.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Circular.
just as another example, so say a person is in the passion mode and they're really identified, they're passionate, and it makes me think of a child in a grocery store wanting candy.
Mhm.
I have to have it. But we all have that kind of inside of us sometimes. You're identified. If you think of going over to the positive pole of reservation, it's restraint, right?
Okay.
Just as
Mhm.
an example, identification, you go from identification, you realize you're identified, and just go to restraint and realize, well, it's not that important. I'll live
Mhm.
without that candy. It's
So
not
is it
going
like
to be the end of my life.
so I'm looking at the way the chart is made. Say you just mentioned passions, right? And maybe you're in the negative is identifying with the passion. Maybe
Mhm.
there's no boundaries. So you said, how about look at restraint? So I'm looking at passion as it's underneath outward, inspiration outward. Like
Mhm.
that's too much outward. And
Right.
then the
Yeah, and
restraint is
that's
more
another
inward. You need to
right.
rein
There's
it in.
right. Yeah.
That's what I was trying
Right.
to understand these
Mhm. Yeah, and that is true. And I think in people in general, that's something to watch for, whichever one is more prominent. Like people who are very introverted, you can just turn inside yourself so much
Mhm.
And I think one thing about the introverted sides, the inward focused sides, is that it takes things out on itself.
Mhm, mhm.
So you can just get completely consumed by
Mhm.
that. Um, the expressive people, um, they tend to take out on other people. So a person in the power mode, for instance, if they have a problem with something, they'll take it out on someone else rather than on themselves. So,
Right.
and I was just kind of confirming what you were saying. There's a balance in between. We all need
Inward
to,
and outward, if you're in the
yeah, we
negative.
need not to be too much of either,
Mhm, mhm.
because the balance is in the middle.
Yeah, it sounds kind of Buddhist to me. Middle of the road.
Well, it is, I think, actually, spiritually, I think the easiest path is the path of balance. I
Yep.
mean, that's Jesus and Buddha and, so many.
Yeah,
That's the way they defined their paths.
of non-attachment, so
Mm-hmm.
that you're not too much of either.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anyhow, we will go into this more too, but I think it's very interesting. Like idealist, the negative pole, if you find yourself just naively following an ideal, look at the positive pole on the other side. Why don't you? You maybe need to learn to investigate more.
Yeah, be more of a little bit more of a skeptic. It's so
Right.
funny. It's so funny we covered all this. So I was having a conversation with my best friend about how to react to whatever happens with the elections before this. So we were talking about, I
Yeah.
said, let's just take the middle path, don't attach to it. So
Right.
that was we were prepping our minds for.
Yeah. Anyhow, if you start looking at the pairings, it's very interesting. And I do like what you said also about you could probably go over to the neutral one with any of them.
Yes, that's a what you call it, a balancer or kind of neutralizes
Yeah, you
all.
want to be neutral.
Yes, yes. Want
So,
assimilate that. Well, okay. I will learn I learned a lot and I will have to continue to learn how to use that's kind of interesting, like complex chart.
yeah.
And I'm interested how these archetypes fit the tarot cards.
Oh,
So,
really? Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I
Huh.
hadn't thought about that, but I can give it a
Yeah.
little thought. I'm into tarot myself.
Yeah, I'm just when I saw priests and artisan, sage and king and all that, I thought, oh, okay.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, thank
any
you.
questions? Anything else?
No, thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. It was fun, wasn't it? Because of the
It
two
was
of us.
fun and I read and I liked it, but I knew I needed to understand it
Yeah.
quite a bit more. So
Yeah.
that was good.
Yeah. And for everybody listening, later, remember that this is not something that you're trying to identify yourself. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to explore and just to see how you can give yourself more choices if you start
Mhm.
looking at those negative versus positive poles. Or for
How to,
me, if I'm in caution, I want to develop more power, I can. Or if I want to learn to assert myself more, I can.
hmm.
It's like understanding all the options that you have, like where you are now, where you might be going. Um, and it's never, if you find yourself stuck in a negative pole, it's not because you're a bad person. just it's just a lesson. It's something to learn from by finding
Pa-
your way out.
Part of your greatest gift or your biggest lesson.
Right. Exactly.
And
Okay, so I guess that's it then.
that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank
Okay.
you, V.
Have a
And
lovely
Philip will
evening.
be here on Thursday to practice.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you so much. Good
Bye
night.
bye.